Good morning, year 11s. I'm back again, Mrs. George here. I am on chapter 5 today, which is page 66. So if you want to write at the top, you can just write chapter 5. Terrible handwriting, but that's the max I could do, guys. All right. Now let us read the important bits and pieces. The summer was coming to an end. The Jewish year was almost over. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah is, I'm not saying the right way, the pronunciation of that word, because that is Jewish New Year. Okay, so that means Jewish New Year. The last day of the cursed year, the entire camp was agitated, and every one of us felt the tension. After all, this was a day unlike all the others, unlike all others, the last day of the year. The word last had an odd ring to it. What if it were the real last day? So that is a little bit important because the word last had an odd ring to it. What if it really were the last day? You know that Elie Wiesel is using a lot of euphemism. What do you mean by euphemism? Euphemism means saying it in a better way, saying something. For example, you know that instead of saying someone as dead, we say passed away. That is euphemism. So here again, that word and that phrase, what if it really were the last day, that actually symbolizes, or that actually signifies the last day, the death. So that is euphemism. Elie Wiesel is actually using euphemism, and he's using a lot of euphemism. I might have missed that in chapter 1, 2, and 3. There are a lot of euphemisms. So go back and have a check whether you have had any other euphemisms in the other chapters as well. The evening meal was distributed, and especially thick soup, but nobody touched it. We wanted to wait until after prayer on the that word. That's a German word again. As I told you, that means the place where they are doing the roll call. That was actually surrounded by electrified barbed wire. Thousands of Jews, anguish on their faces, gathered in silence. Night was falling rapidly. Sorry, I meant to highlight it. Night was falling rapidly, and more prisoners kept coming from every block, suddenly able to overcome time and space to will both into submission. Night, remember the word night is always a metaphor here. There are a lot of repetition of the word night. So the night is actually a metaphor, and that symbolizes the darkness in their life, that symbolizes the dark days which is going to come. So dark night is always a metaphor, and it is a motive. It is a motive as well because it is repeated. Something that is repeated is called motive. So it is a metaphor and it is motive as well. So keep that in mind. And next paragraph is really important. What are you, God? I'm just going to give a different color. What are you, God? I thought angrily. How do you compare to this stricken mass gathered to affirm to you their faith, their anchor, their defiance? What does your grandeur mean? Master of the universe, in the face of all this cowardice, this decay, and this mystery, why do you go on troubling these poor people's wounded minds, their ailing bodies? So here we could see lots of questions. And basically you could say that Elie Wiesel is actually questioning God. He is questioning God. So Elie, who once lived a life full of prayer and religious study, here he is actually questioning God. He is doubting the faith. So the theme is doubting or losing faith. I won't say losing faith, but it's mainly, he's not completely losing it, but it's mainly questioning his faith. That will be the right word. Or doubting his faith or questioning his faith. That will be the right word. He hasn't lost his faith. He hasn't completely lost his faith. He's mainly questioning God. He's doubting his faith. So keep that in mind. Some 10,000 men had come to participate in a solemn service. Just ignoring that. All bureaucrats in the service of it. Blessed be the Almighty. So everyone says, blessed be the Almighty. The voice of the officiating inmate had just become audible. At first I thought it was the wind again. Blessed be God's name. Thousands of lips repeated the benediction, bent over like in a storm. Again, that is another simile. There are so many similes. Elie Wiesel has used a lot of simile. So this is one among that. Thousands of lips repeated and bent over like storm. Again, that means that people have still has got faith in God. They are still praying. Not some of them, even though some people like Elie Wiesel, they are doubting their faith. Still, there are many other people who actually believes in God and they hold on to their faith. Blessed be God's name. And then again, that whole paragraph is really important. It's similar to the other paragraph that you have seen, and it is all about Elie Wiesel doubting his faith again. Why would I bless him? Every fiber in me rebelled because he caused thousands of children to burn in his mass graves, because he kept 6 crematoria working day and night, including Sabbath and the holy days, because in his great might he had created Auschwitz, Birkenau, Buna, and so many other factories of death. How could I say to him, Blessed be thou Almighty, Master of the universe, who chose us among all nations to be tortured day and night, to watch as our fathers, our mothers, our brothers end up in the furnaces. Praised be thy holy name for having chosen us to be slaughtered on thine altar. So again, we could see the same thing. He is actually doubting his faith, questioning God, questioning his faith. And that is really important because we clearly know that that kind of a change has happened. So that is actually a change that has happened for change of Elie. In chapter 1, we could see Elie as a very devoted person who always lived a life full of prayer and religious study, but now he is actually rebelling against this. He rebels against his faith. He rebels. I listened as the inmate's voice, it was powerful yet broken, amid the weeping, the sobbing, the sighing of the entire congregation. All the earth and the universe are God's. So again, that phrase is also showing that people still hold on to their faith. Other people still hold on to faith. He kept pausing as though he lacked the strength to uncover the meaning beneath the text. The melody was stifled in his throat. And I, the former mystic, I was thinking, the former mystic, before he was a very devoted person. Mystic is actually someone who believes in the existence of reality beyond human comprehension. God is always like that. We will not be able to understand with our intelligence. So Elie Wiesel was such a person. He was a mystic, not now, formerly, prior to Holocaust or prior to his situation. Now he was a mystic. But now he is thinking, and I, the former mystic, was thinking, yes, man is stronger than God. So here, when he says man is stronger than God, he is actually referring to the Germans, who is actually stronger than God. Here he says Germans are stronger than God because they have got power above God. Because here, according to Elie Wiesel, what he sees is the Germans are burning people, all that, torturing people day and night. So he actually thinks in his mind that Germans are powerful or stronger than God. When Adam and Eve deceived you, you chased them from paradise. When you were displeased by Noah's generation, you brought down the flood. And Sodom lost your favor. You caused the heavens to rain down fire and damnation. But look at these men whom you have betrayed, allowing them to be tortured, slaughtered, gassed, and burned. And what do? They pray before you, they praise your name. So here he is still questioning God, and he's asking, what are the things that you have done? There is reference to Adam and Eve. There is reference to Noah. All these words, Sodom, all these words are from the Bible. The Old Testament, from the Bible. So reference to famous personalities like Adam and Eve and Noah, all these passing reference, that is a technique called allusion. That is a language technique used by Elie Wiesel. Passing reference to something which is really famous, passing reference to something which is known to everyone. Everyone knows who Adam and Eve is. So a reference to the personalities in the Bible, and that technique of passing reference is called allusion. When I told you about Dr. Mengele, again, that was also allusion because he was also a famous guy, a very famous, notorious guy. So that kind of reference to someone who is actually known to all, that particular technique is called allusion. So here, Elie Wiesel in his memoir actually uses allusion. So in that paragraph, he is asking, he is questioning God, and still you have done all this. Still they are praying before you. They praise your name. All of creation bears witness to the greatness of God. In days gone by, Rosh Hashanah, again the new year, had dominated my life. So in days gone by, here he is reminiscing about his past life. He's thinking about his past life. So if it was before, if days gone by, New Year actually dominated his life. I knew that my sins grieved the Almighty, and so I pleaded for forgiveness. In those days, I fully believed that the salvation of the world depended on every one of my deeds, on every one of my prayers. So you can see how faithful he was. He was holding on to faith formerly. So his past life was full of faith. It was full of faith, and he is still remembering how New Year has actually dominated his life long back. For him, he actually pleaded to Almighty and he asked for forgiveness. But now, look at the change. But now I no longer pleaded for anything. I was no longer able to lament. On the contrary, I felt very strong. I was the accuser, God the accused. My eyes had opened, and I was alone, terribly alone in a world without God, without man, without love or mercy. I was nothing but ashes now, but I felt myself to be stronger than this Almighty, whom my life had been bound for so long. In the midst of these men assembled for prayer, I felt like an observer or a stranger. Again, that is the theme of, you could see the theme, a change, a complete change that is happening to Elie. Elie's life has completely changed, and he is just a rebel now, doubting his faith, doubts his faith. And he says that I no longer plead for anything. I no longer plead to God for anything. But still he says that I still feel very strong. And I always accuse God. I'm the accuser. I'm the one who accuses. And who is accused? Who is he accusing? God. My eyes had opened and I was alone, terribly alone in a world without God, without man. So he was so sad about all the things that has happened to them and to their life and to their people around them. Killing babies, killing innocents, burning people. So he couldn't understand the reasoning behind all this, and that's why he is questioning God, and that's why he is doubting his faith. That doesn't mean that he has completely lost his faith, but he is acting as a rebel. He is a rebel, and we could see a change. So change is a big theme. Change is a big theme that is in the memo. So keep that in mind or write it down. The service ended with Kaddish. Again, we could see that people are really faithful. The Jewish people are really faithful. Each of us recited Kaddish for his parents and for his children and for himself. So again, faith. You could see the faith there, faith of Jews. Even though there are some people like Elie who is actually doubting about the love of God and the mercy of God, still there are many others who hold on who cling on to their faith. That is the reason why they are saying the Kaddish, they are saying the prayer for the dead. I'm skipping next paragraph. The one after that, I ran to look for my father. At the same time, I was afraid, having to wish him a happy year in which I no longer believed. He was leaning against the wall, bent shoulders sagging as if under a heavy load. I went up to him, took his hand and kissed it. I felt a tear on my hand. Who was it? Whose was it? Mine? His? I said nothing, nor did he. Never before we had understood each other so clearly. This is also an important theme. You could see the theme of love and compassion and the family, the relationship. So the theme of love, family, relationship. You could see the theme of family, relationship, the importance of family and relationship, how people care and understand each other. Father-son relationship, especially father-son relationship we could see here. So what is that relationship? I ran to look for my father. When everyone was celebrating and praying for the New Year day, he went and ran to his father. At the same time, I was afraid of having to wish him a happy year in which I no longer believed. Again, we could see his loss of faith. He doesn't believe in New Year anymore. And he was leaning when he went. His father was actually leaning against the wall, bent shoulders, sagging as if under a heavy load. I went up to him, took his hand and kissed it. I felt a tear on my hand, and he doesn't know whose tear that is, whether it was his dad's or his. I said nothing, nor did he. Never before we had understood each other so clearly. So that is actually a moment of pure love, a moment of pure love and compassion. That is a moment of pure love and compassion. And we could see the love and compassion of that father and son that is occurring at that instant when both father and son actually share with each other their lost faith in God. Both of them, they have lost their faith in God at that moment. And that is the reason why even the father is just crying. He couldn't even plead to God or request to God and pray to God. So both of them have actually lost their faith in God, and it is at that moment they are understanding each other, and that's why that last line is important. Never before had we understood each other so clearly. The sound of the bell brought us back to reality. Again, you could see a small alliteration there. Brought us back to reality. Bell brought us back to reality. Alliteration to emphasize the current situation of them coming back to their reality. So alliteration is there. We had to go bed. We came back from very far away. I looked up at my father's face, trying to glimpse a smile or nothing like it on his stricken face, but there was nothing, not the shadow of an expression. It was just defeat. So he was completely defeated. Maybe we could even interpret that he is completely defeated because he has completely lost his faith, and he feels like he is defeated because he was such a person. Even his father was a person who was into all the religion, Judaism and religion, but now he is completely lost and he couldn't accept God anymore. So we could maybe interpret that as his defeat, about his loss of faith. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, should we fast? The question was hotly debated. As I told you in the very beginning, religion, Jewish religion, for them, the Jewish tradition, they follow all the tradition. So on this Day of Atonement, for them, they usually fast. And this time, when they were in camp, question was hotly debated. To fast could mean a more certain, more rapid death, because at this stage, if they are going to fast, that means it's a more certain and more let me just highlight it, more certain and more rapid death. And you could see the repetition of that word more. You could see the repetition of more. It's mainly to stress to emphasize the situation, the current situation. So at the moment they are struggling already, they haven't got enough food, and if they're going to fast on top of this, that is going to ruin their health. So in order to stress on that, Elie Wiesel is using repetition, and he says to fast could mean a more certain, more rapid death. In this place, we were always fasting. It was Yom Kippur year round, but there were those who said we should fast precisely because it was dangerous to do so. We needed to show God that even here, locked in hell, we are capable of singing His praises. That line is important because that actually shows the faith of Jewish people. Faith. They are actually trying to praise God, and they wanted to show God that even in the time of their suffering, they are actually singing praise to God. And to be frank, that is the real faith. That is the real faith. Even while we are undergoing some sufferings, we should be able to say thanks, and we should be able to praise God, and we should be able to love God. And that is the real faith. And the rest of the Jews are actually showing that faith. I did not first fast. Again, what happened to, we could see the change again in Elie Wiesel. Change, the theme of change again. And he is actually, there is a loss of faith. What I meant to write there is change. Okay, loss of faith. I did not fast, and he makes it clear that I did not fast, first of all, to please my father who had forbidden to do. And then there was no longer any reason for me to fast. I no longer accepted the silence. I no longer accepted God's silence. As I swallowed my ration of soup, I turned that action into a symbol of rebellion, of protest against Him. And I nibbled on my crust of bread. Deep inside me, I felt a great void of opening. So that we could actually see that he is not completely losing his faith. It is just he couldn't accept God's silence. He couldn't accept God's silence. So basically, he is doubting God. He couldn't accept God's silence when they are undergoing so much of suffering. So we could see the change in Elie Wiesel's life. Such a devoted person, now questioning and rebelling and losing his faith. The SS offered us a beautiful present for the new year. I was no longer in the same block as my father, so that's really important. They had transferred me to another commando, the construction one, where 12 hours a day I hold every slabs of stone. The head of my new block was a German Jew, small with piercing eyes. That evening he announced us to henceforth no one was allowed to leave the block after the evening soup. A terrible word began to circulate soon after: selection. So selection was a process when they selected people who are really weak and they put them to the crematoria for burning. So that is the selection process. We knew what it meant, and SS would examine us whenever he found someone extremely frail. Was a missileman was what we called those inmates. He would write down his number, good for the crematorium. So you could see the inhumanity there. You could see the brutality there. Brutality and inhumanity is the theme. Brutality, inhumanity. So we could see the theme of brutality and inhumanity. The SS officers will be examining everyone. And if they feel that one person is frail, they will write, or they will call them Wieselman. Wieselman is actually a German word for Muslim. It's a German word for Muslim. And it's just a slang here. In this context, it's just a slang for a prisoner who is so weak. If someone is calling a Wieselman in this Holocaust context, and especially in this book, that means it's just a slang for a prisoner who is actually so weak. It might have derived from the perceived resemblance of a prisoner in a Muslim prayer position. They might have seen someone like a Muslim praying. The frail people will be bent. They'll be really bent because of their lack of health, and that may resemble to the way a Muslim actually prays. They always bend down and they pray. So because of that resemblance, that might be the reason why they have used that slang Wieselman to call a frail person in the camp. So just remember that it is a slang for a prisoner who is so much weak or frail. After the soup, we gathered between the bunks. The veterans told us, "You're lucky to have been brought here so late. Today, this is paradise compared to what the camp was 2 years ago. Back then, Buna was veritable hell. No water, no blankets, less soup and bread." So one person is just telling how hard this place was before, long back, and they are saying that you guys are lucky because today this is just a little paradise. And enough, be quiet, I begged them. Tell your stories tomorrow or some other day. They burst out laughing. They were not veterans for nothing. Are you scared? We too were scared, and at the time for good reason. The old men stayed in their corner, silent, motionless, hunted down creatures. Some were praying. You could see faith again here, faith in God, especially elder people, old people. They are clinging on to the faith in God. Elder people, and it's just younger people like Elie Wiesel who is actually rebelling. Older people could understand, and they are still praying to God. And look at the way they are the hunted down creatures, because we know that old men will be frail, and that's the reason why that phrase hunted down creatures. 1 more hour, they would know the verdict: death or reprieve. What do you mean by reprieve? Reprieve means it's a kind of temporary relief. So after 1 hour, they will know the verdict, the judgment, whether it's death for them or whether it's a temporary relief, reprieve for them. And my father, I first thought of him now. How would he pass selection? He had aged so much. So that is his worry. And my father. So in that phrase, you could actually see the love, his love, his love for his father. He's caring for his father, and he's wondering about his father, and he's really worried whether his father would pass the selection because his father is really aged. Next page. He had already been through a slaughterhouse, all the factories of death. Around 9 o'clock, he came to stand in our midst and he said, Achung. Achung is a German word for attention. Attention. So, just to get the attention, it's a German word, attention. There was an instant silence. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. For the first time, his voice cured. In a few moments, selection will take place. You will have to undress completely, then you will go one by one before the SS doctors. I hope you will all pass, but you must try to increase your chances. Just highlighting from there to here because I hope you will all pass, but you must try to increase your chances before you go into the next room. Try to move your limbs, give yourself some color so that the blood flows and so that to make them really healthy. Don't walk slowly and run. So the commando is actually really good, and we saw that it's a German Jew. The new in the new block, the head of them was actually a German Jew, and he's such a nice guy. And there we could see act of kindness. It's his act or words of kindness. At times in this Holocaust, we could see action of kindness or words of kindness from different people. And this is one such instance where people are being kind to others. And he's saying that don't give up. Walk slowly. Don't walk slowly. You have to run. Run as if you had the devil at your heels. I would like you to underline maybe that phrase. Run as if you had the devil at your heels. And that is a simile. It is a simile. Sorry, there is no L. Run as if you had the devil at your heels. So that's a simile to show that to say that they have to run fast. Don't look at the S's, run straight in front of you. He paused and then added, and most important, don't be afraid. That was a piece of advice we would have loved to be able to follow. I undressed, leaving my clothes on my coat. Tonight there was no danger that they would be stolen. Tibi and Yossi, can you remember them? Tibi and Yossi, two brothers who had changed commandos at the same time I did, came to urge me, let us stay together. It will make us stronger. Again, action of kindness, love, compassion. We could see love and compassion at times among the prisoners. Yossi was mumbling something. He probably was praying. So prayer, they are clinging on to their faith. Not everyone is not like Elie. Yossi is clinging on to God, praying. I had never suspected that Yossi was religious. In fact, I had always believed the opposite. Tibi was silent, very pale. All the block inmates stood naked between the rows of rows of bunks. Again, you are getting a beautiful imagery there. The terrible brutality, inhuman. I want you to maybe underline that much. All the block all the block inmates stood naked between the rows of bunks. This must be how one stands for the last judgment. You know that last judgment is in the Bible. The last judgment means the last day. On the last day, on the judgment day, Jesus or God will be appearing and will be judging people based on their actions. And so here, this is a beautiful imagery. And he is comparing it to a biblical imagery of last judgment. So by paralleling the Nazis to God, he's trying to compare, or he's trying to parallel Nazis to God. And he's comparing Nazis like God or to God. And Wiesel conveys the sheer amount of power that they had. And when he is doing that comparison, or when he is paralleling, when he is calling Nazis like gods or comparing Nazis to gods, his main aim is to show, or the reason why he is doing that parallelism is to convey the sheer amount of power that they have got, the sheer amount of power that they held. To show the power is another theme. Power is a theme. We could see the power of the Germans. So, in not to show the power of the Nazis, Elie Wiesel is actually using this beautiful imagery where the inmates were forced to stand naked between the rows of bunks. So that is a imagery of brutality done to the Jews. They are coming. 3 SS officers surrounded the notorious Dr. Mengele. So Dr. Mengele is back here. Allusion, a passing reference to someone who is famous. So again, that is allusion, reference to someone, allusion. The technique is allusion. Um, and he's asking, ready? He's asking, are you ready? Yes, we are ready. So were the SS doctors. Dr. Mengel was holding a list or numbers. He nodded to the prisoner functionary. We can begin, as if this were a game. So you could see the power of Nazi again there. You could see the power of Nazi, especially Dr. Mengel. And that power is greater than the power of God. That's how they feel, how the inmates feel like, greater than the power of God. Or that is the reason why he is comparing his judgment day to the last judgment day of the Bible. So that comparison is mainly to show the power of Nazis. The first to go were the notables of the block. So that word, the German word, means the senior soldiers, the capos, the foremen, all of whom were in perfect physical condition, of course. Then came the ordinary prisoners' turns. Dr. Mengel looked them over from head to toe. From time to time, he noted a number. I had but one thought: to not to have my number taken down and not to show my left arm. Why do you think he is saying that, not to show his left arm? Because it's on his left arm that he has got his number. Remember, he hasn't got a name anymore. They have tattooed a number. And so his decision, Elie Wiesel's decision, he is just making up his mind that he would run fast and he would not show his left arm so that Dr. Mengel can write down his number. He will try to be as active as possible. That's what he has decided. In front of me, there were only Tibi and Yossi. They passed. They passed the selection. I had time to notice that Mengel had not written down their numbers. So while they were running, Elie Wiesel noticed, and he understood that Mengel has not written their numbers. So they were saved. Someone pushed me. It was my turn. I ran without looking back. My head was spinning. You are too skinny, you are too weak, you are too skinny, you are good for the events. The race seemed endless. I felt as though I had been running for years. You are too skinny, you are too weak. At last I arrived, exhausted. When I had caught my breath, I asked Yossi and Tibi, did they write down my name? No, said Yossi, smiling. He added, anyway, they couldn't have. You were running too fast. So we could see a beautiful simile there. I felt as though, when you see an as or like, you know that it's a comparison, it's a simile. I felt as though I had been running for years. So he felt like he did run for a long time. So that is a simile there. Did they write me down? No. Yes, I began to laugh. I was happy. I felt like kissing him. At that moment, the others did not matter. They had not written down. They had not written me down. That quote is really important because it connects to the theme. Where is that? At that moment, yeah. I wanted a different color. That's fine. At that moment, the others did not matter. They had not written me down. So what technique is? Oh, sorry. What theme is that? Survival, self-preservation. His only self-preservation. His only intention was to preserve himself, to survive. Survival, that was the main thing. And by this stage, Elie started thinking about his own survival. He doesn't care about anyone else. He started thinking about he's being a bit selfish there, and he says that they had not written me down. That's all that I need. So survival or self-preservation. You could see that theme repeating again, survival and self-preservation. Those whose numbers had been noted were standing apart, abandoned by the whole world. Some were silently weeping, especially the old people. The SS officers left. The prisoner functionary appeared. His face reflecting our collective weariness. It all went. It all went well. Don't worry. Nothing will happen to anyone. Not to anyone. He was still trying to smile, but then someone said, but sir, they did write down my name. At that, he got really angry. What? Someone refused to take his word. What is it now? Perhaps you think I am lying. I'm telling you once and for all, nothing will happen to you. Nothing. You just like to wallow in your despair, you fools. So he is being angry when people are actually anxious and they wanted to know that whether they have got selected or not. but the head of them is actually promising that nothing will happen to them. With all my strength, I began to race towards block. A second. With all my strength, I began to race towards block 36. Midway, I met my father. I came towards me. So, did you pass? Yes, and you also. So we were able to breathe again. So we could see the beautiful relationship, father-son relationship there, father-son bond, or the family, father-son bond, and that love and care, because he eagerly was running with all his strength. He wanted to know about his father, whether he has passed the selection, and he too has passed. We were able to breathe again. My father had a present for me, a half ration of bread, bartered for something he had found at the depot, a piece of rubber that could be used to repair a shoe. The bell, it was already time to part, to go to bed. The bell regulated everything. It gave me orders and I executed them blindly. I hated that bell. Whenever I happened to dream of a better world, I imagined a universe without a bell. So a few days passed. The ration has gone. The rations had grown smaller, and that was the only change. We're not getting enough food. Next page. Let's have a moment of quiet. I have a list of numbers. So the next day, the officer is coming and saying that you need to be really quiet. I've got a list of numbers. He read some 10 numbers. We understood these were the numbers from the selection. Dr. Mengel had not forgotten. And the 10 prisoners surrounded him, clinging to his clothes. Save us. You promised. We want to go to the depot. We are strong enough to work. We are good workers. We can. We won't. And look at the ellipses. They couldn't even complete their words to emphasize on their anxious nature, and to emphasize that they really wanted to go back. They really don't want to get selected and killed. He tried to calm them, to reassure them, but after all, I stay here every day. I'm just skipping some. Again, I saw my father running in my direction. Suddenly, I was afraid. What was happening? He was out of breath, hardly able to open his mouth. Me too, me too. They told me to stay in the camp. So again, now Elie Wiesel is getting the terrible news that his dad is also selected. They had recorded his number without his noticing. What are we going to do? I said anxiously. But it was he who tried to reassure me. It's not certain yet. There is still chance. Today they will do another selection, a decisive one. So we could see the hope. The father, Elie Wiesel's father, is really hopeful and giving some hope to his son as well. Sorry, guys. I said nothing. He felt time was running out. He was speaking rapidly. He wanted, I'm just underlining that whole paragraph. Sorry, guys. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? Yeah, there we go. He felt time was running out. He was speaking rapidly. He wanted to tell me so many things. His speech became confused. His voice was choked. He knew that I had to leave in a few moments. He was going to remain alone, so alone. So again, we could see that beautiful father-son relationship. Father-son relationship. And then father is trying to give him something. Here, take this knife. I won't need it anymore. You may find it useful. Also take the spoon. Don't sell it quickly. Go ahead. Take what I'm giving you. My inheritance. So that's all he is about. That's all he can give to his son, because knife and spoon, all those things are really precious, especially at that time, because they could barter it, they could exchange it, and they could gain something. Maybe they could gain a ration by exchanging things like this. So that is why he is actually giving all those inheritance, and he says that it is his inheritance. And what about Elie? What is Elie Wiesel's? He says, don't talk like that, father. I was on the verge of breaking into sobs. I don't want you to say such things. So he was really sad to hear such kind of words from his father. Keep the spoon and knife. You will need them as much as I. I will see each other tonight after work. So he's trying to give hope. He is actually trying to give that hope to his father. When father is hopeless, he hasn't got much of optimism in his mind. And we could also see the guilty feeling of Elie Wiesel. Guilt, inaction. He couldn't act. He is helpless. his inaction, his powerlessness, all these are themes. So you could connect these phrases to any of these themes. You could say that Elie Wiesel is really guilty. He is enacting. He can't act because he doesn't. He's not powerful. He's powerless. He looked at me with his tired eyes, veiled by despair. He insisted, "I'm asking you, take take it. Do as I ask you, my son. Time is running down. Do as your father asks you." Capu shouted the order to march. The commando headed towards the camp gate, left, right. Then he began to run to try and catch up with us. Perhaps he had forgotten to tell me something. We were at the gate. We were being counted around us. The din of military music. Then we were outside. All day I plodded around like a sleepwalker. Beautiful simile there. Tibi and Yossi would call out to me from time to time, trying to reassure me again. Hope is trying to give. They are trying to give hope, as did the capo who had given me easier tasks that day. So that's also really important. Come on. Okay, so small act of kindness. You could see small act of kindness in among the prisoners. So Toby and Yossi is always reassuring that Elie is fine because they know that Elie is a bit sad about his dad. And even the capo at that stage was ready to give minor, easier tasks for that day. So small act of kindness we could see. Everyone knew my father. Even now my father is helping me. So just because of his father, because of their relationship, because of their love, everyone is actually helping Elie Wiesel. So even now he says that my father is actually helping me because he survives because of his father, because of his love, because of the care of his father. Next page. At last we began the return journey. How I longed for an order to run the military march, the gate, the camp. I ran towards block 36. Were there still miracles on the earth? He was alive. He has passed the second selection. He had still proved his usefulness. I gave him back his spoon and knife. So we could see that hope and some hope and optimism, and he returns with the news that he has not selected. He has not been selected. Now we are meeting Akiba Drama again. I'm sure we have talked about Akiba Drama. Akiba Drama has left us a victim of the selection. So we could see Akiba Drama who is dying because he was selected. He is a victim of selection. Lately, he had been wandering among us, his eyes glazed, telling everyone how weak he was. I can't go on, it's over. We tried to raise his spirits, but he wouldn't listen to anything we said. He just kept repeating that it was all over for him, that it was all over for him, and that he could no longer fight. He had no more strength, no more faith. His eyes would suddenly go blank, leaving two gaping wounds, two wells of terror. So we could see the loss of you. You met Akiba Drama in the other chapter, and we knew clearly how faithful he was. He was such a devoted person. He was always talking about God, and there are many phrases where we could actually see the Akiba Drummer's faith. He was such a faithful person, but now here a change has happened to him. So change, another theme, change, and he has completely lost his faith. He says that he couldn't hold on to anymore. He was not alone in having lost his faith during those days of selection. I knew a uh, Rabbi from a small town in Poland. He was old and bent, his lips constantly trembling. He was always praying in the block, at work, in the ranks. He recited entire pages from the Talmud, arguing with himself, asking and answering himself endless questions. One day he said to me, "It's over. God is no longer with us again." So we could see two examples of loss of faith, especially in the elder people. He was a rabbi. He was a priest, but still he couldn't cling on to his faith, and he lost his faith. And as though he regretted having such words, so coldly, so dryly, he added in his broken voice, "I know. No one has a right to say things like that. I know that very well. Man is too insignificant. too limited to even try to comprehend God's mysterious ways. But what can we do? What can someone like myself do? I am neither a sage nor a just man. I am not a saint. I am a simple creature of flesh and bone. I suffer hell in my soul and my flesh. I also have eyes and I see what is being done here. Where is God's mercy? Where is God? How can I believe? How can anyone believe in God's in this God of mercy? So that is really important. That whole paragraph, actually, even the whole of his words are really important, because we could actually see the loss of faith, having and losing faith. He wanted to, he's not having and losing his faith. So he's not completely abandoning God, even though he says that it is over, God is no longer with us. He regrets and he feels guilty in saying that. He actually feels guilty because he says that man is too insignificant, too limited to even try to comprehend God's mysterious ways. He knows that because he is a rabbi. But still, he couldn't hold on to his faith. And that's why towards the end, he's questioning, where is God? How can I believe? How can I believe uh, anyone in this God of mercy? Again, poor Akiva Drama, he could only have kept his faith in God. If only he could have considered the suffering as a divine test, he would not have been swept away by the selection. But as soon as he felt the first chinks in his faith, he lost all incentive to fight and opened the door to death. So that particular paragraph is also really important, because here we are getting the idea that since they have stopped holding on to the faith, they are about to die. So that line is really important. As soon as he felt the first chinks in his faith, he lost all incentive to fight and opened the door to death. So they still believe that Akiba Drama could have lived if he was holding on to his faith. So that means that they all are really faithful. They wanted to hold on and to cling on to God, but just because of their sufferings, they are too tired and they couldn't. When the selection came, he was doomed from the start, offering his neck to the executioner, as it were. All he asked was, in 3 days, I will be gone, say Kaddish for me. So only thing that he requested, Akiba Drama requested them, is to say Kaddish. Kaddish is a prayer said for the dead people. So he is requesting others, his inmates, to talk about or to pray for him while he is dead. So we could see the theme of death, and we could see the having faith. See, even though he couldn't hold on to his faith, he is asking people to pray for him. That means that he hasn't completely lost his faith. He is still having faith. We promised, so other people promised. We promised in 3 days when we would see the smoke rising from the chimney. What does that mean? Smoke rising from the chimney means that he will be when he is dead. So that is actually a euphemism. Euphemism, a word or a phrase for the death of that person. So in 3 days, that is euphemism. See the smoke rising from the chimney. We promised in 3 days when we would when we would see the smoke rising from the chimney, we would think of him. We would gather 10 men and hold a special service. All his friends would say Kaddish. So according to his faith, he wanted other people to pray for him while he is dead. Then he left in the direction of the hospital. His step was almost steady and he never looked back. An ambulance was waiting to take him to Bergnaw. They followed terrible days. We received more blows than food. The work was crushing, and 3 days after he left, we forgot to say Kaddish. So the real fact is that people just care about themselves because they have got their own struggles. They have got no food. They are receiving more blows. The work was actually crushing them, and because of all that, they actually forgot to say Kaddish for that Akiba Drama, who was actually such a faithful person. Now winter had arrived. Again, winter season, it'll be really hard for the prisoners, for the captives. The days became short and nights almost unbearable. From the first hours of dawn, a glacial wind lashed us like a whip. A beautiful simile. A glacial wind lashed us like a whip. Simile, We were handed winter clothing, striped shirts that were a bit heavier. The veterans grabbed the opportunity for further sniggering. Now you will really get a taste of camp. We went off to work as usual, our bodies frozen. The stones were so cold that touching them, we felt that our hands would remain stuck. But we used to go, but we used to, but we got used to that too. Christmas and New Year, we did not work. Christmas and New Year's, we did not work. We were treated to a slightly less transparent soup. Around the middle of January, my right foot began to swell from the cold. So his food, Elie Wiesel's food, started to swell. He could not stand. I went to the infirmary, so he had to go to the hospital. Infirmary is like a clinic hospital. The doctor, a great Jewish doctor, a prisoner like ourselves, was categorical. We have to operate. If we wait, the toes and perhaps the leg will have to be amputated. That was all I needed, but I had no choice. The doctor had decided to operate, and there could be no discussion. In fact, I was rather glad that the decision has been his. They put me in bed with white sheets. I had forgotten that people slept in sheets. Look at the dehumanization, the theme of dehumanization, because they have been treated, the prisoners, like Elie Wiesel, have been treated like animals. And that is why he says that I had forgotten that people actually slept in sheets. So that was the level of dehumanization, dehumanizing. Slept in sheets, a beautiful alliteration as well there. Alliteration, alliteration, beautiful alliteration. Actually, being in the infirmary was not bad at all. We were entitled to good bread, a thicker soup, no more bell, no more roll, no more work. From time to time, I was able to spend a piece of bread to my father. So next to me lay a Hungarian Jew suffering from dysentery. Dysentery is a tummy upset kind of sickness. He was skin and bones. He was skin and bones again. Uh, that German Jew, Hungarian Jew. I could just hear his voice, the only indication that he was alive. Where did he get the strength to speak? And he constantly says, "Don't rejoice too soon, son. Here too there is selection. In fact, more often than outside. Germany has no need of sick Jews. Germany has no need of me. Germany has no need of me. When the next transport arrives, you will have a new neighbor." All that means, what does it all that mean? Germany has no need of me. When the next transport arrives, he will have a new neighbor. That means he will die soon, and there will be, again, that's another euphemism. So he will die soon. Therefore, listen to me. Leave the infirmary before the next election. So that Hungarian Jew was forcing him to leave the infirmary before the next election, because he said that the selection actually happened even in the hospitals. These words, coming from the grave, as it were from a faceless shape, filled me with terror. True, the infirmary was very small, and if new patients were to arrive, room would have to be made. But then, perhaps my faceless neighbor, he's calling him faceless neighbor, afraid of being among the first displaced, simply wanted to get rid of me, to free my bed, to give himself a chance to survive. Perhaps he only wanted to frighten me, but then again, what if he was telling the truth? I decided to wait and see. The doctor came to tell me that he would operate the next day. Don't be afraid, he said, everything will be all right. Words of hope and optimism, act of kindness. My doctor was there, that reassured me. I felt that in his presence nothing serious could happen to me. Every one of his words was healing, and every glance of his carried a message. And he was saying, it will hurt, but it will pass, be brave. So full of an act of kindness, act of kindness and hope and optimism. He is trying to give, the doctor is trying to give hope, act of kindness, hope, optimism. The operation lasted 1 hour. They did not put me to sleep. I did not take my eyes off my doctor. Then I felt myself sink. When I opened my eyes, everything went well. You have spun my boy. Everything. Next, you will stay here for 2 weeks for some proper rest, and that will be it. You will eat well. You will relax your body and your nerves. So again, lots of optimism, hope, and act of kindness. All I could do was follow the movements of his lips. I barely understood what he was telling me, but the inflection of his voice soothed me. Again, kindness. Suddenly, I broke into a cold sweat. I couldn't feel my leg. Had they amputated it? Doctor, I stammered. Doctor, what is it, son? I didn't have the courage to ask him. Doctor, I'm thirsty. He had water brought to me. He was smiling. He was ready to walk out. So Elie Wiesel was actually doubtful whether the doctor has amputated him. But then he says that, listen well. In 2 weeks, you will be fully recovered. You will be able to walk like the others. So full of optimism and hope. The sole of your foot was full of pus. I just had to open the sack. Your leg was not amputated. You will see in 2 weeks you will be walking around like everybody else. So hope and optimism again. But 2 days after my operation, rumors swept through the camp that the battlefront had suddenly drawn nearer. The Red Army was racing towards Buna. It was only a matter of hours. We were quite used to this kind of rumor. It wasn't the first time that false prophets announced to us peace in the world, the Red Cross negotiating our liberation, or other fables, and often we would believe them. It was like an injection of morphine. Another simile. It was like an injection of morphine. Simile. So they always used to hear such kind of rumors. So that was like an injection of morphine. Only this time, these prophecies seemed more founded. During the last nights, we had heard the cannons in the distance. My faceless neighbor spoke up. Don't be deluded. Hitler has made it clear that he will annihilate all Jews. Again, he will annihilate all Jews. Is an euphemism for death, for killing. Death. He will kill. He will annihilate all Jews before the clock strikes 12. I exploded. What do you care about? What do you care? What he said. Would you want us to consider him a prophet? His cold eyes stared at me. At last he said wearily, I have more faith in Hitler than anyone else. He alone has kept his promises, all his promises to the Jewish people. That afternoon at 4 o'clock, as usual, the bell called. All the officers for their daily report. They came, back shattered. They had difficulty opening their mouth. All they could utter was one word: evacuation. So after selection, there came evacuation. They had to evacuate. The camp was going to be emptied, and they are to be sent to the rear. They are going to move from there. They should be evacuated. That is the next procedure. When tomorrow night perhaps the Russians will arrive before, again they are hoping. They are still, even at that last minute, they still have got hope. Hope. Perhaps we perfectly knew that, well, they would not. The camp had become a hive of activity. The camp had become, that's a beautiful metaphor. The camp had become a hive of activity, metaphor, comparing the camp to a hive of activity. People were running, calling to one another. In every block, the inmates prepared for the journey ahead. I had forgotten about my lame foot. A doctor came into the room and announced, tomorrow, right after nightfall, the camp will start on its march. Block by block, the sick can remain in the infirmary. They will not be evacuated. That news made us wonder, were the SS really going to leave hundreds of prisoners behind in the infirmaries pending the arrival of their liberators? Were they really going to allow Jews to hear the clock strike 12? Of course not. All the patients will be finished off on the spot. Again, another euphemism, finished off on the spot. Euphemism for death. Euphemism. Sorry guys for not writing it clear. I don't know. I'm just rushing. That might be the reason. Euphemism for death. And in one last swoop, thrown into the furnaces. Another one. Surely the camp will be mined, said another. Right after the evacuation, it will all blow up. Again, lots of euphemism there. As for me, I was thinking not about death, but about not wanting to be separated from my father. So again, he is not worried about death. He is worried only about his father. So we could see the family relationship, father-son relationship still there, father-son relationship. We had already suffered so much and so much together. Again, look at the repetition of the phrase so much to emphasize the severity of their suffering. This was not the moment to separate. I ran outside to look for him. The snow was piled high, the block's windows veiled in frost. holding a shoe in my hand, for I could not put it on my right foot. I ran, feeling neither pain nor cold. What are we going to do? My father didn't answer. What are we going to do? He was lost in thought. The choice was in our hands. For once, we could decide our fate for ourselves. To stay, both of us, in the infirmary, where thanks to my doctor, he could enter us either a patient or a medic. I had made up my mind to accompany my father wherever he went. Again, relationship, family, compassion, care. Well, father, what do we do? Again, he was silent. Silence is a metaphor, it's a motive. People are silent many times. That shows that they are powerless. Let us be evacuated with others, I said. He didn't answer. He was looking at my foot. You think you will be able to walk? So, Dad was actually worried about Elie Wiesel and was wondering if he will be able to walk. Yes, I think so. Let us hope we won't regret it, Eliezer. Again, that is an important phrase because that is a dramatic irony. Because we clearly know that, or in the next line, dramatic, that is a dramatic irony because he, at that moment, father is saying to son, let us hope we won't regret our decision to walk, to march with others. Because father was really doubtful about Elie Wiesel walking with his food. But Elie Wiesel decided that they will go with others, they will walk. But at that moment, father is actually saying that, let us hope we won't regret it. And that is a dramatic irony because of this. After the war, I learned the fate of those who had remained at the infirmary. They were quite simply liberated by the Russians 2 days after the evacuation. So the people who were in infirmary, in hospital, were liberated by Russians just 2 days after the evacuation. And that makes this sentence a dramatic irony because we clearly know that that didn't happen. Let's hope we won't regret it. They actually regrets their decision. We know that Elie Wiesel actually regrets his decision later when he decided to walk. So that is a dramatic irony there. I did not return to the infirmary. I went straight to my block. My wound had reopened and was bleeding. The snow under my feet turned red. The officer distributed double rations of bread and margarine for the road. We could take as much clothing from the store as we wanted. It was cold. We got into our bunks the last night in Buna. Once more, the last night. Let me highlight that first. The last night in Buna. One more, the last night. See, they have that last night is repeated. Want you to underline that maybe. Last night. Look at the repetition of that last night. Last night, last night, last night, last night, last night. So there is a repetition of last night. And he says the last night in Buna. Once more, the last night at home. We had a last night at home. Remember in chapter 1, they had a last night in the ghetto. They had a last night in the cattle car. Now the last night in Buna. How much longer would our lives be lived from a one last night to the next? So that last night is actually a motive. That is repeated motive. Motive. M-O-T-I-F. Recurrent or repeated theme or a word or an idea or a concept is called motive. So that last night is a motive there. And that darkness actually continued. That means that their darkness in their life is actually continuing. Darkness continues. Uncertainty continues. That darkness and their uncertainty in their lives that actually continues. I didn't sleep through the frosty window panes. We could see flashes of red. Cannon shots broke the silence of night. How close the Russians were between them and us. One night, our last, that there was whispering from one bunk to the other. With a little luck, the Russians would be here before the evacuation. Again, their hope. People are still, even at the last minute, they are still hoping. So the hope, element of hope there. Someone called out, try to sleep, gather your strength for the journey. It reminded me of my mother's last recommendations in the ghetto, but I couldn't fall asleep. My foot was on fire. That's a good hyperbole. We could call that as a hyperbole. It's a bit of an exaggeration. He says that my foot was on fire to emphasize the pain he endured. So Elie Wiesel is using that hyperbole to emphasize the pain he endured. It was very painful. That's why he says that my food was on fire. In the morning, the camp did not look the same. The prisoners showed up in all kinds of strange garb. It looked like a masquerade. Again, another simile there. Looked like a masquerade. Simile. We each had put on several garments, one over the other, to better protect ourselves from the cold. Poor clowns, wider than tall, more dead than alive. Poor creatures whose ghostly faces peeked out from layers of prisoners' clothes. Poor clowns. I tried to find a very large shoe in vain. I tore my blanket and wrapped it around my food. Then I went off to wander through the camp in search of a little more bread and a few potatoes. Some people said we would be going to check. No to Grossen, no to Gleiwich, no to, that's just ellipses. Again, he's using that ellipsis to show that it's just continuing. Their predictions were just continuing. Predictions were continued, and they were not sure. They were not sure about anything. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the snow continued to fall heavily. Now the hours were passing quickly. Dusk had fallen. Daylight disappeared into a grey mist. Suddenly, the officer remembered that we had forgotten to clean the block. He commanded 4 prisoners to mop the floor 1 hour before leaving camp. Why? For whom? For the liberating army, he told us. Let them know that here lived men and not pigs. That's a bit sarcastic as well. So we were men after all. The block was cleaned from top to bottom. At 6 o'clock, the bell rang, the death knell, the funeral. The procession was beginning its march. Again, that reference to theme of death. Fall in quickly. In few moments, we stood in ranks, block by block. Night had fallen. Everything was happening according to plan. The searchlights came on. Hundreds of SS appeared out of the darkness, accompanied by police dogs. The snow continued to fall. The gates of the camp opened. It seemed as though an even darker night was waiting for us on the other side. So it seemed as though an even darker, what night is darker than this? So it seemed as though an even darker night was waiting for us on the other side. The first blocks began to march. We waited. We had to wait the exodus of the 56 blocks that preceded us. It was very cold. In my pocket, I had 2 pieces of bread. How I would have liked to eat them, but I knew I must not yet. Our turn was coming. Block 53, Block 55, Block 57. Forward, march. It snowed on and on. So they have started their march. That is the end of this chapter.